It's great to be here. I wanted to share some of the research that I've been doing around the big shift, what I call the big shift, which are the long-term changes that are playing out in the global economy, driven in part, at least, by digital technology. And there are many dimensions to that big shift, but there's one dimension that I don't think gets enough attention. And it's basically the notion that the big shift is producing mounting performance pressure on all of us, as individuals and as institutions. And in the context of that mounting performance pressure, it's my belief that the successful companies of the future are going to evolve into movements. And I mean by that, organizing large numbers of participants in grassroots efforts to pursue agendas for change. Now, I don't mean social entrepreneurs. That's a segment of the business world. I'm not talking about corporate social responsibility initiatives within large companies that are typically on the edge of the company. I'm talking about the core company becoming a movement. And I think that's a huge countercultural shift. I think, at least in the popular mind, most people, when they talk about companies and movements, talk about them as in opposition. On the one side, you got companies, and on the other side, you have movements, labor movements, environmental movements, privacy movements that are in opposition and fighting companies. I want to make the case that actually there's an opportunity to integrate these two. And I think it's a big opportunity on multiple levels, again, in the context of mounting performance pressure. One of the things that movements do very effectively is provide significant leverage. If you get a movement right, you mobilize a very large number of participants to support an agenda. You also drive accelerated learning. You've got a lot of people who are striving in a common direction, and they're typically learning faster than if it's just one institution or one small group of people. So you've got leverage and learning, and then loyalty. I think in a world of mounting performance pressure, the notion that we're coming together in a common cause to achieve something, and that by coming together we can achieve more of our potential than we ever could on our own, spurs an incredible loyalty among those who are involved. So that's why I believe movements are so important and why I believe companies are going to have to become movements. The key question on the table is, okay, so what does it take to catalyze and build a movement? I've been involved in movements throughout most of my life, all of my life, and I have studied even more movements. And over the years, as a result of those efforts, I've come to believe that there are two elements that come together that make for a successful movement. And the first is what I call a narrative. And here I want to make a distinction that most of us, when we talk about narrative, also tend to use the word story, and we use them interchangeably. I want to make the case that actually there's a distinction that's important between story and narrative. Stories, at least the way I talk about them, are self-contained. They have a beginning, a middle, and a resolution. Something happens to resolve the story. And a story is about me, the storyteller. Or it's about those people over there. It's not about you. You could use your imagination to figure out what you might have done in the context of that story, but it's not about you. A narrative, on the other hand, is open-ended. There is no resolution yet. There's an opportunity or potentially a threat out on the horizon, but it's not clear whether it's going to be achieved or realized. And the resolution of that narrative hinges on you. It hinges on the choices and actions you're going to take and make. What's it going to be? It's a call to action that says you have the ability to make a difference in terms of resolving this narrative. Very powerful notion. Now, I will hasten to say that when I talk to executives about this concept of narrative, often I get the response, oh, we have a narrative. You know, we started in a garage, very humble beginnings. We faced incredible obstacles. We overcame them. We did amazing things. And it's open-ended. A lot more to come. The question that I pose to them, though, is, so what's your call to action to others? Is it just to sit in awe at this incredible thing that you've done? Or buy more of your products and services? That's not the kind of narrative I'm talking about. I also will differentiate. There's been a lot of discussion around the concept of purpose. And a narrative, in my framing, is not purpose. Purpose, typically, when it's framed, when it's developed, is a purpose for the company. What's our purpose? Again, it's not a call to action to others outside the company. What's your call to action to others? That's a different notion. Now, I don't think there are many companies that have mastered the power of narrative, but I do give one example just to illustrate the potential and the possibility. And that's Apple. Apple came up, it was condensed ultimately down to a slogan, which was "Think Different." But if you unpack that slogan, there was a really powerful narrative that said basically, you know, through decades we had digital technology that shoved us into cubicles, took away our names, gave us numbers, and made us cogs in a machine. Now, for the first time, we have a generation of technology out there that allows us to establish our unique identity and personality and achieve our unique potential. But it's not a given. It's not guaranteed. You have to think different. Are you willing and able to think different? It was a call to action. And I think it's the reason why, for many people around the world, Apple has become the equivalent of a religion. There was a narrative that spoke very powerfully to something very deep inside of us and was a call to action. To say you can make a difference. So narrative is one piece to an effective movement. The other piece is something that I call creation spaces. It's a way, so you've made a call to action with your narrative. How do you organize people for action? And typically creation spaces, at least based on the movements that I've studied, are organized around very small groups of people, typically 10 to 20 people, who form very deep, trust-based relationships with each other and work together to get impact, driven and shaped by the broader narrative. And then those small groups of people are connected in very rich mesh networks where they can interact with each other and learn from each other in terms of the experiences these other small groups are having in the movement. Very powerful way to scale and accelerate learning. And just a quick example, I think every successful movement that I've studied has this creation space model. There's a great article that Malcolm Gladwell wrote in The New Yorker called The Cellular Church. And what he was focused on was the evangelical movement. And he made the observation, you know, the media gets distracted when they talk about the evangelical movement. They focus on the mega churches and those Sunday sermons where this powerful preacher gets up and shares the word. He said that's not where the real action is in the evangelical movements. The evangelicals have organized in small groups of about 10 people each. And they meet at least once or twice a week outside of that Sunday sermon. And their whole focus is on how do we get action? How do we have impact from our beliefs? And they're learning from each other very rapidly by watching each other in terms of what kind of impact is achieved. So I think if you combine these two elements, a powerful narrative, a call to action, with a different way of organizing around creation spaces that can scale and accelerate learning, you have a very powerful way to deal with mounting performance pressure, which again, I think is a reality that we all are going to face as individuals and as institutions. So I have a very short period of time up here. I hope I've intrigued you enough. There's more that I've written on this subject and can certainly encourage you to Google Hegel and movements and companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And that was very good clock watching, so I appreciate